Okay, excellent. So welcome everyone. Mariela, thanks a lot for introducing, welcoming, and also setting this up, the dialogue. So I'm very happy to welcome you here to our first session of the Global RENdez-vous Dialogue series that is dedicated this time to designing the renewable-based economy, where we are really looking at demand, electrification, and system transformation. So thanks to all for joining us today. As it's usual on the RENdez-vous, we are trying in the virtual space to create something as if we're sitting in the same room. So that's really useful to, so I invite you to really, if possible, keep your camera on and engage and really jump into the discussions and so on the chat and ask questions. For the ones who don't know me, my name is Gibb. I'm the Executive Director of RENdez-vous here in the Secretariat based in Paris. So let's start. We are living in an extraordinary historic moment, I guess. As very challenging parts, but also the reality that it's a major opportunity for renewables and not only to change basically a fuel, but really build economies that are powered by renewables, economies and societies powered by renewables. And I think this is basically the entry point from RENdez-vous side to these discussions. Think what is clear is the energy system is transforming very rapidly. Countries are looking into renewable energy to address climate change, but also to address basically the economic volatility and energy security concerns. And the current dependence on imported fossil fuel and all risks related to this are really at the forefront of many decision makers, many economies, societies, and also individual households and people. So we need to have more resilient and affordable systems. And from RENdez-vous side, I think this is a part where we clearly see that there is not only an entry point that, so we have really developed a renewable-based economy framework. And one of the transformation that we see is that we basically need to connect energy generation more strategically with the energy demand, and move to a demand-driven integrated planning strategies of the energy system, along with the economic strategies and industrial strategies, but also very clearly the role of society and the local benefits is very much at the forefront. So this is a major, if you like, this dialogue is really to be seen as a contribution to this part of how do we move from probably something that is more energy supply and commodity markets to something that comes from what is the energy demand and how do we meet this best with renewable energy, because they are the better solution for economic resilience and so on. So lots of opportunities, but also challenges. And I think let's also be honest, these transformations are not easy. And very often we look at these in quite siloed ecosystems. You see supply, infrastructure, demand, you might have development, etc. And I think let's try to see this as a building block and a first step to bridge basically the demand sectors with the renewable supply sectors. So to kick this off, and I will then very quickly move to our great speakers and representatives of the demand sectors, I would basically like to quickly share 2 quick slides that do indicate some of the opportunities or the systemic transformation we're looking at, right? But also some of the realities and the starting points. So when we speak about a renewable-based economy, and I think this is really the part, is we clearly see that there is an integrated energy system. We're used to this. We typically look at it more from a fuel and infrastructure side, but we fully acknowledge the importance of demand and system flexibility. We also see that energy is an enabler of all economic development, industrialization, and there are also economic and industrial players who are consuming this. And energy does contribute to basically economic benefits and job creation, GDP contribution, and so on. And it's also clear that the society changes because renewables are quite different. So this is really the different components of a renewable-based economy framework that RENdez-vous has developed with its members, but also acknowledging that when we're looking at international relations, we have international relations, obviously, because we're in a globalized market, but it goes down to local realities. So it is also about international, regional, national, subnational, and local realities. Now, on the left side, and this brings me to, so I'll jump to the next part directly. Policies are fundamental if we really want to read here. And I think this is definitely one of the topics I would like to also hear your thoughts about. Now, when we're looking at the demand sectors, we clearly see renewable energy does represent major opportunities, but the reality is actually quite challenging when we're looking all in all at the share of renewable energy in the total final energy consumption. We're around, 13.4%. This is 2022 numbers. When we're looking at renewable energy in industry, 18.1%, buildings 17.7%, transport only 3.9%, so this is 2020 new numbers, and agriculture 17.8%. So to move to something that is a renewable-based empowered economy and renewable-based energy services to all these demand sectors is actually needs to be run in a strategic, intentional way. We need to have the right enabling frameworks, but also bringing the different decision makers, investment, infrastructure planning together. And I think here, and I'll end on this, is when we're looking at policies for the different demand sectors, we actually realize that only few countries have renewable energy policies in all four main energy consuming sectors, even though these energy consuming sectors are actually key drivers for the economies in which they are operating. So I think this is already giving like one of the challenge, which is how do we have a stronger alignment between basically planning and policy design targets, but also bringing basically the players together. Now I'll stop my sharing. And to kick us off, I think this is, so this was really to kick the discussion off and also look into what we're addressing here today is bringing really the demand reality to a renewable-based economy discussion. So from the demand sectors, you have already seen that we're speaking about buildings, transport, industry, agriculture, and I'm really, really happy to basically have a representative of all these sectors with me, and I invite you to this virtual panel while I'm sorting my papers. So I'll start with you, Eniola, Mafe-Abaga, who is the Global Advocacy and Partnerships, FIKA, formerly Bridges to Prosperity, and our transport representative. And I'm very sorry because the reality is transport is obviously not only one sector. You cannot speak for all the sectors, etc. So we, and that's also why I think we're really kicking this off to start with. But it's very clear that this requires more differentiated follow-up discussions too. But so today you're our transport face, so to say.
Thank you, Rita. I'll do my best.
Duncan Gibb, Senior Associate of the European Program Regulatory Assistance Project, heavily involved in global ABC and representing the building sector.
Hello.
Hello, Duncan. We have Irene Varoli, who's a lead on transitioning industrial clusters from the World Economic Forum. So here, the industry voice, the business and industry voice, I guess.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Irene. And we have Andrew Loebus, who is a lead expert on energy access of REEEP. And you're specifically focusing on the renewable energy and agriculture. So today you're our agriculture voice.
Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. And I guess, I mean, the first part is you probably understand very often the renewable energy community coming together comes from a supply side. So I think to really kick us off, I would be really interested if you could explain us what the current situation, the energy situation, means for your sectors today. What the context is in which you're operating, what are main challenges, main barriers, but then also more specifically, which role does renewable energy play today in those sectors? So who would like to start? And please don't hesitate to build on each other. I think this is... Okay, Eniola, I'm just going to...
Yeah,
Duncan was going to.
I don't mind kicking off, if that's
cool.
okay, Duncan. So I'm joining today. I'm Eniola Mafe-Abaga. Thank you, Irene, and the organizers and other panelists. But I'm coming in two capacities. One is a SLOCAT board member, and then also as our global advocacy and partnerships director at FIKA, formerly Bridges to Prosperity. I think for those that don't know about SLOCAT, it is a global partnership similar to REN21. 100 organizations working on how we align the transport, private sector, public sector around a coordinated effort for low carbon, people-centered, right? And so transport is not really another demand sector per se, although we are talking about it as that for electricity, for renewables. I think we can see transport as shaping how the economies even function. So it determines where people can reach jobs, whether food reaches markets, whether children reach schools, whether patients reach clinics, whether goods are more reliably moved through the supply chain. So I think it's a real opportunity not only to electrify transport, but also reshape how transport demand around access, efficiency, affordability happens. So when I think about this, I think about it in two ways in terms of this shift towards a more renewable-based energy system. Is first, transport can create large, predictable demand for renewable electricity, rail, public transport fleets, electric 2- or 3-wheeler vehicles, shared mobility, freight, logistics, ports, depots. That list can go on, as you mentioned. Transport covers a large space, and also charging corridors that can all become kind of anchor demand for renewable electricity. I think then secondly, from the other side, transport demand kind of needs to, for the first reason, it really does need to be shaped more. So we're not just simply saying that electrification, not simply that electrify the kind of inefficient, disconnected, car-dependent systems. If we do that, we may be able to reduce some of our emissions, but we still kind of leave the affordability, access, congestion, energy waste kind of unresolved. So the numbers are clear. Transport consumes about 27% of global end use energy. And then over 95% of transport energy is still fossil based. We all know this. I'm speaking to experts in the room. So kind of shifting transport away from oil is central to that energy security, economic resiliency, and fossil fuel phase out. So I would say transport is certainly not a downstream issue. It's not a downstream user of energy. It can actually make electricity, renewable electricity demand much more predictable, much more productive, and actually even politically relevant, especially when you're talking about election periods or, broader national development plans. There's a real opportunity to join up efforts there. So I want to leave with some of those main messages on that side. And I'm really excited that we have these voices talking about this issue from a multi-pronged perspective.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Eniola. And I think it's really interesting because you will even use another language than typically we might use when we speak about energy systems. And I think this is certainly a bridging part, but also thanks for bringing up the affordability. And so, Duncan, you were going to jump, and so I interrupted you. So affordability is obviously also very, very important in the building sector. But over to you. What are your thoughts from the building side?
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be back in the REN21 community. Very happy to be here. And I'm a senior associate at RAP, but also steering committee member at Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction. So we're looking at buildings from the perspective of energy, of course. That's what I do most of the time, but also Global ABC looks at it from the perspective of the construction industry. So that's less what I work on, but I want to mention it up front because I think there are great opportunities for renewable energy generally in that sector, whether it's making steel with renewable electricity directly or through low carbon cement or using natural materials. All of that is very relevant. From the energy perspective, I think maybe a bit in contrast to transport, buildings feel a little bit on the front lines. It's where we live. It's where we use energy directly. They're immobile. We have electrical appliance demand in these buildings, which can be met directly by renewables. We also have heating, cooling demands we need to increasingly switch to renewable energy. I'll talk about that in a lot more detail. On this front, though, I was listening to a podcast today about what's been going on in the Strait of Hormuz and everything, and it was very interesting to hear how this has been. You can see this effect, not only this, but in the last few years on buildings. So the deployment of solar PV is up in Pakistan to 25% of buildings have solar PV on the roofs now, or households, I think is the figure. That's wild to me. That's really, really impressive. And frankly, I mean, I know many of us here are motivated by climate change concerns. That's not the argument here. We're talking about energy security. We're talking about reliability. We're talking about not being dependent on daily imports of fossil fuels. It's why Ethiopia has banned internal combustion engines and is switching to EVs. Sorry to take a bit of the transport side, but it just came to mind. They also mentioned that if you look at Aleppo these days, it's covered in solar panels. So this I find really fascinating from a humanitarian standpoint. I've been working in renewables for over a decade, and it's really it's satisfying to see these arguments about energy security, affordability finally starting to take root and starting to change. It's really sad that it has to happen in the context of some horrible crises, that's going to have real humanitarian impact. But it is happening. And so from the buildings perspective, we're still heavily dependent on fossil fuels. If we look at some of the latest figures, this is from Global ABC's report. We have about 25% of global emissions that are in residential and non-residential buildings. The construction industry itself is about 13% of global energy and process emissions. If we look at the energy consumption for heating in buildings, it's still only 16% renewables. A lot of this is bioenergy. Of course, we have ambient heat from heat pumps, which is around a little bit less than that. We're saying 5% for bioenergy, 4% for heat pumps, which are the large takers. But we're still, seeing fossil fuels, which are almost 2/3 of building heating demand. So obviously, this needs to change. We've seen various kind of levels of progress around the world. I speak mainly from a Europe perspective. This is where I live and work. But we've seen the heat pump industry, for instance, be kind of, let's say, victim to the global crises. There was a big boom in heat pump sales following the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022 and subsequent gas price explosion. The heat pump sector is back again in 2026. As a result of the surging gas demand, or gas prices, I should say, and oil prices. So we need to move to a place in the building sector where we're not just responding to emergencies. And I think, in Europe, we're getting there with the upcoming electrification action plan, with the Accelerate EU, with countries that are putting in place policies that are designed to spur the uptake of heat pumps. We will see, but I'm hoping that we're moving into a more planned rollout of clean heating systems and not just responsive to crisis. Yeah, so I'll leave it there, but happy to keep talking more about buildings.
Thank you very much, Duncan, and thanks for your renewable enthusiasm, I guess. But I'll also build on something you said. I think, yes, it's a pity that it's crisis leading out there. Today, the economy seems to be right. Just some numbers. The EU bill for fossil fuel imports has increased over 22 billion since the conflict in Iran, or the war in Iran, has started. The Philippines, on the other hand, have declared a state of emergency because of energy crises. The energy crisis. Spain's renewable energy provided a clear cushion on electricity prices, and we also realized that the realities from one country to another are quite different, depending basically on their renewable and fossil fuel dependence. Now, Irene, I think the industrial sector globally, and because it's global and local parts, I would be curious to hear. I mean, very often we hear like, okay, the industrial sector leaves no energy prices. This is a major problem today. Plus, there is supply chain interruption. So, what is today the reality on your sector or the sectors you're representing? It's very vast. And how is renewable energy looked at?
Thank you so much, Rana. Maybe a quick introduction about the World Economic Forum. If anyone is new to it, the forum is the international organization for public-private cooperation. We're mostly famous for the annual meeting in Davos, but we actually carry out a lot of activities and projects also throughout the year. We work closely with the private sector and the public sector, and we have over 20 industry communities covering oil and gas, electricity, mining and metal, chemical, and so on. And if we think of where most of industrial activity takes place around the world, most of it is concentrated around industrial clusters, which are geographical areas which concentrate companies, industrial activity, energy and logistic infrastructure, and talent. And you can think of Port of Antwerp, Port of Rotterdam to get an idea of what are these areas that I'm referring to. These are the engines that power our economies. They generate a lot of billions in GDP. They create a lot of jobs, but they also consume a lot of energies. And therefore, they're key to drive the energy transition and also competitiveness and jobs creation. So 4 years ago at the forum, we launched the Transitioning Industrial Cluster Initiative with the objective to support the transformation of these industrial areas. We started with 4 clusters around the world, and now we have over 40 covering over 20 countries. And each cluster is unique, brings together different sectors, has different governance structures and maturity levels. But the observation is that many of the challenges that industries face today can be better addressed by working together and with a collaborative approach. You can think of energy security and affordability. You can think of financing large-scale energy projects like hydrogen or carbon capture that require coordination among many actors in the value chain, or improving resource circularity to reduce waste and strengthen resilience. And what is interesting is that when clusters are able to function as interconnected ecosystems, then a lot of opportunities arise. And one of these opportunities is to help drive the shift towards renewables. Because when clusters function in a coordinated way, they can enable aggregation of clean energy demand and the build out of shared infrastructure. So you can think of on-site wind, solar, storage, or even emerging solutions like green hydrogen. And this approach brings different advantages. First is scale, because when you're able to aggregate demand, then you can make the investments in renewables and storage economically viable and enable economies of scale. The second is system efficiency, because by combining diverse industrial load, you can better balance renewable supply. And the third is energy security and affordability, because the more you rely on on-site generation, the less you're exposed to price volatility and grid constraints. And we have a very nice example from our community, which is the Ordos Envision Net Zero Industrial Park, which is located in Inner Mongolia in China, which uses a digital AIoT platform to integrate renewables storage into a single industrial ecosystem, which includes over 50 co-located companies. And this digital platform is able to optimize in real time demand and supply of renewables, and allows the cluster to operate at 80% renewable energy and cut costs also by 10%.
Thank you so much, Irene. And thanks also for basically the specific focus on industrial clusters. And I think it's quite interesting because you can say like there are the clusters, and then there are the corridors, right? Eniola, you referred to from the transport side. So there's already a big connector. Now, Andrew, moving to you, because we also are very aware that lots of economies are rather dependent on their more agro economies, right? Especially in developing countries too, and might not have the same level of industrialization. Obviously, this is very often in much agriculture is much more in or agri-food systems is located more decentralized in rural areas. And I would be keen to hear what the challenges are you're seeing here, what is the current reality of the sectors, how is this affected by the current crisis, and what does renewables play as a role?
Great. So thank you very much. Let me give the quickest intro to REEP just to kind of set the stage. So REEP is a non-governmental organization. We're based in Vienna, Austria, and our mission is promoting clean energy access in the global south, including remaking energy markets to be more friendly towards lower income individuals. We also are currently running a program focused on productive use of renewable energy, and that's an intervention we're launching just in Tanzania. I myself have spent my entire career in sub-Saharan Africa, so when I'm giving this answer, please understand it's quite tilted towards that part of the world, but let me start nonetheless. So to give the example of Tanzania, I really like some of these themes that Duncan was bringing out, right? There's themes of energy independence. There's themes of food security that a lot of countries at the kind of macro and governmental level are really grappling with. How can we make sure that we can get enough food to feed our people? How are we making sure that, especially as prices of imported food are quite up and down, mentioned the Ukraine war. There's many factors affecting the way that basic staple prices are going for normal people in the market, right? Regular people are facing massive swings in staple foods that can be really dangerous for their families. So at the governmental level, there's a big emphasis on finding those systems and processes that can stabilize food availability in the country. If you go kind of down a level to the kind of firms and private sector organizations that REEP usually works with through our funding programs, the incentives are slightly different. They'll respond to signals of price from the government when these are set, but they have their own incentives. And we like this idea that Irene mentioned of like these clustering, right? Some of these organizations are looking to create their own clusters in which they have their own energy generation. They essentially can declare independence from the grid, not always because the grid is unreliable, that's sometimes the issue, but sometimes the economics with the current pricing of batteries, storage, and panels. For large energy users, the economics might make sense to have either your own renewable energy solutions at your agricultural processing location or a mix of renewable and grid power that can kind of mix in and out. So we're seeing some private sector companies really embrace this move and try to install their own capacity, whether that's for value addition, whether that's for longer term storage, whatever it is, they're often trying to increase the amount of value that they can capture as a firm by installing often these large scale machinery. Now, if you go down one more level, and we're now looking at kind of the base of the value chains, right? These are the women and men who make crops, who are kind of supplying sometimes up to these mid-level firms as contract farmers. These individuals are often very interested in renewable energy because it has the potential to increase their income, right? It can either preserve what they've made, it can sometimes boost their yields if you're looking at things like solar water pumps or pesticide, herbicide sprayers, whatever it is. They can sometimes use renewable energy tech to really boost how much value they themselves are gaining. So I think that looking at all these different levels, you are starting to see a slightly different picture come through. And Eniola mentioned this well, like the future will not look exactly like the present, or maybe it shouldn't. And I think that what you're seeing, especially in the developing world, are people at different stages of these value chains are having slightly different use cases for renewable energy for their own purposes. Again, governmental, this is more food security. At the firm level, it's value creation. And at the very base of the value chain, it's somewhat similar, either stabilization of the value you've produced or trying to create more value for yourself and your family. So these are very different solutions. These solutions will look different, but we're seeing different actors adopting different sizes and shapes of renewable energy, but all towards a similar purpose, to be more independent, to be able to provide for yourself more, and to be able to utilize this technology in a decentralized way. No longer do you need to come to the central area. You can sometimes conduct some tasks or essentially accomplish certain agricultural outcomes in a more decentralized way. And renewable energy has been a very good fit for that. The question comes in now, what are the systems and processes to make this affordable? How are governments coordinating with private sector to ensure that you're having the right kind of mix of incentives versus tax abatement if necessary versus induction? And then from the firm level, how are you kind of participating with the base of the value chain to make sure that you're getting the raw material you need at the quality that's required? How are you feeding skills down? How are you getting the good produce up? This is kind of the cycle that has to be unknotted for each of these different value chains. There has to be a lot of work done to make them functioning smooth enough to allow for the effective introduction of renewable energy.
Thank you very much, Henry. And I'll directly build on what you're saying, because ultimately I think so. Thanks to all for sharing some of the entry points of the sectors. I mean, we clearly hear, or I personally hear, alignment, but also differences, right? I think ultimately, Andrew, you said, like, how do we basically enable that systemically we're building on those opportunities and shifting toward this. I would be if you could share some ideas about how to scale this, how to better align basically the agricultural demand with renewable energy supply, and what solutions do exist for scaling. I mean, you shared some challenges, and it would also be interesting because Eniola, for instance, you spoke about the supply chains. You see, agri-food is directly linked to transportation also. So how do we basically connect these different energy consuming sectors?
So let me give you a little bit of a sketch about what we've been doing as REEP. I mean, this is a part of an answer, and then I can speak to the macro. So one of the things we were finding, as alluded to earlier, is that they're often, if you're looking at the base of the value chain, these are individuals who are making the agricultural commodities that eventually get used in value addition processes, exported, used internally, whatever. These individuals often have a very difficult time of navigating these value chains. There's sometimes only a few buyers. Sometimes the prices are really bad. There can be middlemen who take advantage of them. They sometimes have inconsistent access to information. They can have inconsistent access to market. Sometimes even the technology that they're given is not very good, so they're trying to repair it. So what we've tried to do through our energy funding program, we've created a results-based finance program. So this is a program that provides funding to private sector companies on a results basis. So you get an advance, and then as you deploy more technologies, you get more and more funding. To that, we've also attached the provision of these agricultural services. So companies or organizations, agribusinesses in the space who are willing to access our funding have to give a guaranteed amount of technology deployment. And alongside that, they are specifically incentivized and paid for these services they offer around the technologies. So if you are having, let's say, milk chillers, right? The more you can buy the resultant milk from the farmers, the more you're incentivized for each milk chiller. Our view is that these technologies are much more effective for income generation for the base of the value chain when they're surrounded by these services. So we're trying to encourage organizations applying for our funding to look either internally to develop these systems or to join with partners who are specialized in this to try to bring together both the tech end and the agricultural service end, because we think that the combination of these two is going to be the most impactful for the actual beneficiaries at the end of the value chain. So I think that what essentially has to happen is this on a macro level, right? There needs to be coordinated efforts across each of these value chains to understand where are the end markets, where are the potential for value addition, what are the interventions to increase each of these elements, and sometimes there can be trade-offs of one or the other, right? Sometimes export markets might generate a lot of income for a company, but not have a very big impact on the base of the value chain, the people providing them, right? Trying to map and understand this understanding how money is flowing through the value chain. Are there any changes that need to be made? And how can kind of provision of these services be used at each of these levels? You also asked about transportation, just as an example. So obviously, we're seeing a lot of these different technologies being useful for different use cases. And in our results-based financing window, we were very technology agnostic. We allowed companies who are selling solar water pumps, e-mobility, fridges, all of these to apply. And our idea is that any useful solution might involve multiple technologies in the same value chain, and it may also involve several different companies working together to smooth out the function of this. So this to say, just to round off, more coordination between organizations providing agricultural services and renewable energy, thinking through the ways that which renewable energy can be made more effective by being surrounded by these services, and then also looking at the end markets and understanding what are the barriers to these end markets. Is it this value addition? Is it quality? Is it transport issues? How can you use RE tech to kind of bridge these gaps and ensure that the most amount of value flows down to the base of the value chain where we want it?
Thank you so much, Andrew. And so I think it's sorry, my screen is Eniola, you were going to jump in, so
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I love the fact that we started off in almost divergent demand sectors, and we're really converging around like what the fundamental issues are. And I find myself nodding constantly. I think my neck's going to hurt in the sense that, Andrew's really talked about and framed really well this kind of on the needing to unknot, but also join up and be honest. I think that there are trade-offs, and we have to be honest about what those trade-offs are and be able to find solutions that can work with them effectively if we're really going to kind of crack this nut per se. My leaning has been kind of low to middle income countries. So I want to be mindful that that's the space. However, when we are talking about agri-food systems, predominantly a lot of agri-food systems and the food that we eat is coming from low to middle income countries. I don't know the actual numbers, Andrew probably does, but when we look at where the most of our food is coming from, so the demand is not just on the farm. I think there's movement between the farm, the aggregation point, the processing facility, the cold storage, the market, the consumer, right? And so there are different transport systems that work within those or don't work well within those. One of the biggest issues we're seeing is that there is space for a joined up effort between renewable energy around even cold storage, movement for vehicles that can have cold storage facilities that could be affordable in nature, warehousing, all of those things that become fails at various different points of the value chain, supply chain, whatever you want to call it. And I think even from a transport perspective, one practical way we could scale is to plan around these nodes, these corridors that I mentioned earlier. And I think we're hearing clusters, we're hearing corridors, we're hearing value chains, supply chains. Essentially, they're just links in chains for us to have more kind of network connectivity. And we probably feel it more so at the rural or the point of where food is produced. But I think it's felt across all of those different steps. And so being able to map, for experts like ours to be able to map where those choke points are, where the transport demand alongside agricultural demand, energy demand actually come together, being able to have a very clear idea. And chances are, I'm not a betting woman, but I would bet that there is some significant overlay. And then, I think one of the other things I wanted to mention was that if those nodes are planned well, we're helping government to be able to do this work in a more joined up, networked connectivity way, which makes it much easier for a government minister of infrastructure, minister of energy to have less meetings with multiple different entities telling them almost the same things, and be able to look at this and use, scarce resources, especially in LMICs, use scarce budgets more effectively. So, we're thinking around how can we create more of this kind of opportunity to not just electrify our transportation sector in isolation or agriculture in isolation. It's identifying where those value chains can kind of touch the ground, where demand is concentrated, where the design of the renewable powered like mobility and logistics can be built and designed around those points. So I think this conversation is exciting for this reason, to kind of bring these up to the surface. And I don't think it's that hard, and I don't think it's that expensive. It requires more of these types of efforts of saying, hey, this is where the trade-off is. Transport sector, this is what we're not willing to move on. This is what we are willing to move on. This is how we see affordability, and this is where we could possibly provide data to inform kind of policy and financing.
Thank you so much. I love this part of chains and network connectivity. Also, the Mafe-Abaga, please allow me to play devil's advocate here. Which ministry shall we all collectively talk to? Because I'm not sure that, you see, like in terms of governance, chains and network connectivity is something that is hosted in some. So I would be. So how do we approach this, Eniola? Maybe some quick thoughts on this before jumping to Irene and Duncan.
We have found that as we moved across in more systemic work, Ministry of Budget and Planning, or the equivalent, therefore, because they are thinking about long term, and then from there derive what the kind of short to medium term budgets are. And also, obviously, Minister of Finance, because, in our world on the LMIC side, they're interacting with World Bank, they're interacting with some of the biggest funders. And the funders like World Bank, IADB, and AFDB and others are looking at indications and signaling in budget and planning, in master plans, in national development plans. Sometimes the same plans that they are helping to capacitate government to create, yes. But they want to be able to see that signaling to then be able to de-risk certain parts of it or to provide support. I don't want it to be, this is half theory and real practice and experience I've had engaging with government, but it's not all the same. And I think we do have to have much more examples of what has worked. Case in point, Ethiopia had self-funded, it's the largest dam, and it was self-funded by its own banks and its own diaspora. So that's a whole nother anomaly altogether that doesn't even involve the international system per se. There are questions about that, but when we think about it, I think fundamentally it would be those ministries. And I'd love to hear from Duncan, Irene, and Andrew on this, on what they're seeing in their spaces.
So I will just, Duncan.
Yeah, I can jump in quickly on that because I have example from France is they have the General Secretary for the Ecological Transition, which is sort of an interministerial body that reports directly to the Prime Minister. I think, frankly, it's really complicated because we're talking not only about energy, we're talking about everything. So either you have a ministry for everything, or you need to draw the line somewhere. And I think a good way to you draw the line how you see fit in your country context, but then you have something and a body that is responsible for making these links between them. That's, I think it seems to work. The stuff that I've been reading and seeing in France regarding their decisions more is somewhat coherent. You have an electrification plan they've released, which it could be exposed to certain criticisms, but yeah, it does have a coherence across the sectors, I find. And it's not just here's how we're going to ramp up renewable electricity production, or here's how we're going to decarbonize buildings, or here's how we're going to clean up our transport sector. It's really addressing all of them. So it seems like a model that's sort of working. On the sort of networking leverage points thing, I think from a buildings perspective, one big one is public buildings. We've seen that, like, because you mentioned Eniola in your opening marks, how the transport sector has these very significant loads at certain places like ports and airports you're mentioning. And I was thinking about buildings and how distributed they are, especially if you think about individual homes or even multi-residential buildings. But there are ways to connect them, and that can be through public buildings, that can be through corporations that have large headquarters or have a lot of different shops spread out across a country or a continent, like supermarkets. It could be even through communities. And I think something we can still do better is encourage community kind of interaction on energy related topics. I'm working on a project on intelligent grid forming buildings. And if you can excuse the super nerdy terminology, it's basically how to make buildings work better with the energy system, right? How to make them interact with the electricity grid, not just be a consumer of energy. And a big part of that is having communities kind of come together and make themselves sort of a unified load in a sense. And I think these are ways within buildings you can also create networks that interact with the whole energy system better.
Thank you so much, Duncan. Irene, I think I'll come to you because from the beginning on, you spoke about the clusters, and you also spoke about clusters of infrastructure, different sectors, etc. There might be some really interesting learning. Who are you typically your counterparts you see on the policy side? But then also some learning, because this is what you're doing with this work, is how do you move from a passive energy consumer, I think, as a cluster, to an active player and approach on planning and really driving this transition to a renewable-based economy?
Thank you. So in terms of policy counterparts, it really depends on each country. But what I want to highlight is that what we see really working is when the clusters have a strong governance. And this often happens when clusters are anchored to ports, where there is the port authority that owns the land and also facilitates the build out of infrastructure and collaboration across members. So this is key, and it's not for granted. There are a lot of industrial areas and industrial zones around the world where there is no governance, no shared vision, no collaboration, and then it's really difficult to move in the same direction. Then for what concerns the transition from passive to active players. So I've mentioned what is the role that cluster and industrial areas can play in supporting the build out of renewables, but they can go beyond that. They can also actively manage their demand to indirectly support the grid, reduce bottlenecks, and allow for higher penetration of renewables in the system. And you can think of outcomes like reducing peak consumption to unlock grid capacity and enable the expansion of the cluster. Members in the cluster can aggregate their energy demand and flexibility to actively provide demand response or ancillary services to the grid to balance the needs, and also develop shared storage solutions. And this allows access to new revenue streams, reduces emissions, and also reduces energy costs, because then you're able to avoid peak costs. And there is another nice example of this happening in a cluster in Germany, in the Augsburg region, where like a pilot project led by the Research Institute Fraunhofer developed a digital platform enabling different companies in the cluster to optimize their energy consumption and aggregate their flexibility to have access to the energy markets. And one recurring theme from all these examples is the role of data collaboration and digital solutions enable the realization of these synergies, because when you don't have data collaboration and you don't know what the others are doing, it's really difficult to work together and enable synergies. So we have hosted, as part of the initiative in the past years, a series of dialogues, and now we are working on a report to really look into details at what is the potential that data, digitalization, AI, and new technologies can bring to these industrial ecosystems, and provide a framework so that clusters can set their own foundations and advance in their digital maturity with secure, trusted data collaboration that benefits everyone.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Irene. And I think I find this really interesting because ultimately we all speak about a more demand-led planning, right? Whether it is infrastructure planning, whether it is energy demand planning, whether it is food security, energy security, supply chains, transport, building sectors. But I think putting basically the demand perspective at the center is really important. What I also think is what you said about the governance is very much echoing what Duncan said, right? Depending on the countries, you basically need to see like what is the governance and what are the sweet spots and opportunities, and how do we anchor this into where a more systems approach can be anchored. So unfortunately, so we will have breakout rooms. So the discussion is continuing, but this round of discussion is basically ending here. I will give each of you 30 seconds with one ask, which is, what is, when you're thinking about bringing basically the different sectors here together to shift to a renewable-based economy, what is the first thing we should be doing? And you have 30 seconds deliberately, and then we'll move to the breakout discussion. Andrew.
I can start.
Okay, go ahead, Irene.
No,
Yeah.
I just want to say cross-sectoral synergies and collaboration. That's key.
Andrew.
Irene said exactly what I was very close to what I was going to, but let me just briefly say, when we were designing this pure growth fund, this results-based financing window, we exactly had to do what Irene said. We had to bring agricultural knowledge in and clean energy knowledge. And I think that this is actually very important. Whenever you're designing an intervention for renewable energy in a certain sector, you need quite strong backing and understanding of some of the nuances of that sector to make these interventions very effective. So bringing in sectoral knowledge is very important.
Thank you.
I can go next. So I think planning for the energy system that we want, that we see in the future, not the one that we have. I find that even if it's a renewables based decision, something that's supportive, it's still too much anchored in the energy system we currently have. And we need to be looking to the future, and there needs to be more long-term planning that's stable. I still see, I'm just going to keep listing things, Rana, I'm sorry, but there's still too much kind of backtracking on policies and not commitments. This hurts industry, this hurts consumer, this hurts everyone. So we need more commitment.
Thank you. Eniola.
I mean, I agree with everything that's said, and maybe continuing from what Duncan had said, you know, I think for better or worse, the current crisis has created an urgency of now, and a need and a necessity for collaboration. So let's utilize that for good, you know, and I think that creates part of the issue with some of our industries and some of our sectors is that there is no urgency. Climate change, no urgency. You know, transport, not real much urgency till election time. So let's create the urgency and build that demand.
Thank you. And I think it's maybe building demand. This is like one topic we have not spoken about is also on the projection for the energy system of the future, but also for the energy demand of the future, right? Because in some countries, it still means increasing the energy demand. In others, it will definitely mean reducing the per capita energy demand. And so thank you to all of you for basically this great discussion. I have so many other questions here. I would love to go on, but we really would like to have the possibility for breakout room discussions, because we clearly see this as kicking off, I guess, like a movement of putting like a demand-led and this cross-sector collaboration at the heart of all energy and electrification discussions and planning that is ongoing. And I invite Mariella here to give us some introduction to breakout rooms. All speakers will be in some breakout rooms, so please stay tuned and we'll reconnect after the breakout discussion.
Yes,
Thank you to all.
Thanks a lot, Rana, and thanks to all the speakers for the wonderful interventions. So for breakout rooms, we know you have plenty of comments and questions that we've seen in the chat. We've seen that the discussion has been forming in parallelly in the chat. So very happy that you're already interacting. What we'll do is I'm gonna set behind the scenes the breakout rooms, and we will go into groups. responding one guiding question that I think one of my colleagues will post on the chat. And the speakers will be in these breakout rooms as well. So any questions that you have to them, feel free to ask them at that moment. And particularly if you are very keen on speaking to one of the speakers specifically, do send me a direct message, and I'll do my best to add you to that group where that speaker is in. But this might take a few seconds. So while I'm doing the breakout room, I want to invite my communications colleagues to come in for a quick family photo, I will say. So I think Nabila and Danielle will give you some instructions, and then I'll work the breakout room magic in the back.
Yes, thank you, Mariela. Can you guys hear me? If you can all do this, so you can hear me. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna be the one that's gonna bug everyone. This is the least fun part of it, but we have to do what we do as comms. So we're gonna be here cheerleading a little bit. I'm just gonna ask you to turn on your cameras. It's gonna take less than a minute, maybe two, because there's a lot of people here. I have to go through 4 or 5 screens. So yeah, just cameras on, smiles. You don't need to hold the pose. You don't need to be a statue. Don't worry about it. You can breathe. But we just wanted to have those faces on the record and to be able to share on our social channels and everything. So if I can just ask you that for the next minute or so, while Mariela is doing all the magic, it would be amazing. We're doing great. You guys can talk between each other. Don't be scared.
No, I just thought like this is really great. We can continue the discussion. So
Yeah, you're getting extra minutes.
we're getting extra time.
Yeah, savor them. All right, I got most of your beautiful faces, and we should be good on my side, Mariela. But I can keep talking. I can keep entertaining. I'll be a little
we
jester.
can keep taking pictures. No, so I think from my side it's all right as well. So yeah, but as I said, if you need any changes, then I'm happy to do them while we're in breakout rooms. So we'll have I would say 10 minutes for the breakout room discussion. Feel free to jump in. This is really to learn more about how you see these questions from your work. What are some challenges that you're facing? What are some solutions that you've come up with? And yeah, taking advantage of all these diverse backgrounds in the room to spark some good conversation. So with all of that, I'm going to open the rooms, and yeah, please join. Let me know if you see the option. Yeah, okay, everyone's going. Hello, everyone in this room. I see Emma, Jürgen. Hello, all. So that's great. We have a bunch of people here. I think, feel free to add on the chat, where are you working at? I see also Akshay from SLOCAT is in the room. Would someone like to start with this question on, what you're seeing specifically on this topic from your work. So, hello, everyone here. Well, I see Jürgen, you asked all rooms have the same, all the rooms have the same questions and themes. If you were part of the conversation before and you want to move to a specific speaker, then let me know now and I can move you. But that's all. Otherwise, it's a random assignment. Maybe we can do a quick round of introductions. I see many people here, cameras off. Anya, would you like to start? I see your name next.
Hi there. My name is Anya. I'm the Managing Director of Community-Owned Asset Management in UK. I don't know how much we have to explain about ourselves, so just leave it there for now.
No, that's great. It's just for some context and also for everyone, feel free to turn your cameras on. So I thought we would do a quick
I'm
round
just trying to search for a quiet place, so as soon as I found it, I will turn it on.
Yeah, no problem. Anyone else? Jeffrey?
Hello?
Yes, we
Yes.
hear you.
Is there a group with agriculture wanted to?
Yeah, sure. Let me take a look at that for you. Back 6. For the people here, because yeah, if anyone has an interest in joining any other group, let me know and I can take you there.
Annie again, sorry. I'm struggling to see the break rooms.
So what would you need to do? Because they are random. So
No, I don't see the name of the titles of the rooms. No.
because they're done randomly, so people just went to different rooms.
Just between one.
They're not visible. The question was whether you may want to speak more to one of the panelists, and if so, then I can add you to that specific room. Otherwise, all the rooms are random.
Hello, Mariela. Can you assign me a random room because I came back from sick and it might not have a speaker?
Yes.
That's fine for me. Just assign me randomly. That's all right.
Yeah, no problem. There you go. So I'll do the same with everyone else here, okay? Because I think what happened is some people came back from being outside, and so I will just move you elsewhere. And I think the rest of you, you haven't joined any other group, so I assume you want to stay on listening mode in plenary, or if not, please let me know. Hello, welcome back. Hello, welcome back.
Hello, Maria.
Welcome. Hi, Eduardo. So thanks everyone for participating in the discussions. I know, these are conversations that could go on for many hours. So this is just a tease, I think, to the topic, and we welcome that you connect after this and keep the conversation going. I think we are at time, but we wanted to give a space for a quick couple of reflections from the rooms. So please feel free to volunteer, to share something you heard that stuck with you, something inspiring that you learned from the conversation in a breakout room, or just a general comment or thought you have on this discussion. Any volunteers are welcome to, including speakers. So please go ahead.
I can quickly
Okay.
give a
Thank you.
quick summary.
Okay, and it's fine.
Please.
Mhm.
Please.
Oh, Andrew, were you gonna?
Sure, I'll give a quick summary from our room. So it was a very good discussion. There was a point made by Jeffrey about how important it is for funding to come into the agricultural and renewable energy space. He was giving the example of some dams in Zimbabwe that they're not really functional, so the need to kind of infuse new funding in to make these assets worth usable. William had a very interesting point about foreign investment, and kind of we were talking about the way that risk and perception of risk is needed to unlock the flows of capital from the global north to the global south. Andrew was asking some questions about like how to actually governmentally coordinate in such a complex space and how you kind of move around it. And then Theophilus right at the end was talking about how given the perception of a lot of this renewable energy technology is quite expensive, there's a role for government to play in thinking through things like tax abatements, duty reductions, etc., to make the technology more affordable for users.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. Anyone else?
I can come in. We had a small group, just three of us, but we talked from the perspective from Federico Fischer about government-owned utilities in Latin America and how demand is largely driven by the utility perspective, which means that the solutions that are being proposed are not usually looking at future energy demand or how energy demand might coincide with society with a more bottom-up perspective. So we talked a lot about how we need these transitions to be bottom up and not imposed. That was our conversation, more or less.
Thanks a lot, Duncan. And so since we are a few minutes late, I'm sure everyone had very rich things to share, but I wanted to also give the opportunity for the partners to share some final reflections on the discussion. So maybe I'll give you the floor, Akshay, Irene, if you want to share something from rep side, or Andrew again, and then Rana, maybe I'll give it to you to close. Akshay, please go on.
Thanks, Mariela, and thanks, REN21 and all the partners for organizing this event. I have around 3 pages of notes, so I'll try to be very brief and just focus on try to condense it in 1 page. So I just want to echo Duncan's point at the beginning where he mentioned about buildings and how PVs are installed everywhere. I live in a small city in India, and it's like on the outskirts of the city, yet since the crisis, it's seen that solar PV has been installed everywhere. And in India, we usually use liquefied petroleum gas for cooking, and now that's been shifting to electric cook stuff to an extent that all of these are out of stock. So this kind of shows a practical translation of the crisis and how it's driving demand. But at the same time, it's quite important to understand the energy mix of different countries. For example, for India, it's a bit of coal heavy. So this shows why conversations like this that REN21 is organizing of bringing together demand sectors is critical, because it's about how this demand can drive and play a key role in renewable-based economies. Speaking of transport sector, so I'm policy analyst at SLOCAT. SLOCAT is a multi-stakeholder partnership. And the easiest way I think of defining SLOCAT is it's a sister organization to REN21. While REN21 focuses on energy systems, SLOCAT works on transport. And in COP20, and in 2 years ago, in 2023, at COP28, SLOCAT and REN21 launched a call for doubling the share of energy efficient fossil-free forms of land transport. And this is one of the ways how cross-sectoral approach could work. And that was one thing that was been echoed in our breaking room from Nina, who mentioned that one of the ways to scale up renewable-based economies could be having more cross-sectoral approach and understanding what other sectors are doing and how this can be replicated in India. In different in globally. Just a little bit about SLOCAT's next engagements, because one of the strategy is Nexus integration, and that's how this platform is super critical, where SLOCAT is currently working in a consultation phase of unified global goal for transport, but that goal will obviously go and circulate around different sectors as well. And currently transport actors are in International Transport Summit. At the same time, SLOCAT is also working on one ministerial declaration that was launched at COP30, which was about transport demand. So 25% of reduction of transport demand, and then meeting that reduction by renewable fuels and sustainable biofuels. So all in all, that's SLOCAT's and transport strategy. But again, this conversation is not just about transport, but rather all the demand sectors being together. So thank you for this opportunity. And yes, as always, SLOCAT stands ready to support REN21 and align our missions and vision together and work together for a renewable-based economy. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Akshay. Yeah, much appreciated and happy to work together as always. From rep side, would you like to jump in, Irene, or yeah?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm REEP. So we were in the same breakout room. We were talking about cross-sectoral collaboration, and I mentioned that REEP and several other of the major energy actors, including S&V, Ngogla, and Irene, are all part of this agri-energy coalition. So that's something we've been working on for the last year and a half to break down the silos between sectors, to really work together with people from the agriculture, the nutrition, and the water side to really bring the conversation to the point where we were looking at the energy, designing energy programs, designing any kind of energy intervention with these lenses in mind, that it's going to be helpful for the food systems, that it's not going to be destructive towards the soil or the water. So having the perspectives of the agriculture bringing the other perspectives into the energy conversation is really critical. So that's what we're trying to do a lot, is bring energy to the agricultural side on one hand at like a big agricultural forums. I'm talking to the agricultural ministries, and at the same time making sure that the energy is then also, so that then their perspectives are brought into our discussions in the energy sector. So yeah, that's the kind of a very active thing we're doing right now in cross-sectoral collaboration. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Irene. Rana, I'll give you the floor to close, and just from my side, thanking everyone for joining and sticking with us till the end and a few minutes after the end. Always appreciated, and looking forward to seeing you all soon. So Rana, please give us the closing remarks.
The last dialogue was long ago, so that's why I still forget to unmute myself. No, thanks a lot to all. Thanks to the partners, SLOCAT and REEP, for joining. Thanks to the speakers for joining. I think I'll bring some short aspects from the breakout room into this discussion because I think they're interesting. Crisis as opportunities. And I think here we had an example shared from Chile, and that has actually forced the players at the national level to come together and address solutions, but also own the solutions. So there was also the comment that basically when we're looking at integration, it's like, so it even goes down to local cooperatives. And I think there is really this part of being, you see, like at the national level, at the local level, renewable energy can allow for building systems that connect local generation with energy demand. I think this is one part. The other one, and I think that's also crisis is solution, but also being honest on where we stand. We were very positive during this discussion, but the reality is we have a big way and need to accelerate and deliver and scale in a moment of pressure. And so I'll take this as to create the urgency to continue to all come together, I think, in the global discussion at the regional level, at the country level, and really share the experiences across sectors. I think this is really exciting. And to be honest, I mean, since the beginning, I think like we really need to have something longer, like a 2 days workshop on exactly those discussions with lots of country experiences, local experiences, sectoral voices, and also developing a new language, because I think this part of corridors, clusters, etc., was brought up from all the different parts, market development. Now, from Rent on one side, what comes next to continue basically this RENdez-vous series on shaping and building and designing the renewable-based economy. We'll have a next dialogue on the 13th May at 3 p.m. CET that will actually focus, after this discussion from the demand side, on systems integration for a renewable-based economy. So I invite you to join us there, bring your perspectives in. And two last comments. One is, it's very clear that a 1 hour dialogue is not going to solve it. We basically need to bring these different perspectives together in all the different activities and in the implementation side. So please don't hesitate to kick this off in your activities. Reach out to us if we can support. We're very happy to do this and also bring basically our members and members partners and so on. The other part is, it's clear that we are in a new era. And when I'm speaking about a new era, I don't speak about the new energy era only. We're in a new era. We are in a moment where we are reshaping our economies and our societies around a fuel that is a fuel of the future, and that is renewables. And in this part, it's also clear that we need new indicators, we need other data, we need other types of policy alignment strategies and players coming together. And in June, we're basically launching the Renewable-Based Economy Tracker as like a data framework to monitor these advancements, but also along with a hub and a community where we're basically bringing all of you together, the knowledge, but then to inform and influence decision making. So please stay tuned on this, and thanks a lot to all of you for your energy, your contributions, the team for preparing this, and I look forward to continuing the discussion and action and implementation, I guess.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Hope to see you next week.
Bye.